Are now live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Magnum Opi podcast. This week, we are going to be looking at Fight Club. Joining me today, we have got Quackhouse.
How did it?
We've got Brandig.
Good morning.
Mr. Lizard.
Goedenavond.
Freelance.
Een vrolijke zondag.
And Justine.
Good late afternoon.
Thank you for speaking a language I can understand. Right. So, like I say, this week we're going to be taking a look at Fight Club, something that everyone is probably familiar with, and most likely from the film. With us, we actually have a unicorn in that Mr. Lizard came into this absolutely blind, knowing nothing about it. How you've got through life so far, not knowing the ending, I don't know. But for anyone that ends up listening and doesn't know, do not watch this unless you're ready to have everything ruined for you. And I highly recommend you either read or watch the film before looking at anything else. So, what did people think of the book? I know that there's some division on the team this week.
There's a couple of points in it where I actually liked what they'd added. There was a couple of things that they'd taken out of the film that I actually quite liked from the book. Just like more like little things. And whereas there's some points in the film that I prefer the way they've worded things, or it just sounds a little bit more poetic or a little bit more punchy. It's a bit, the book kind of rambles on a little bit. The film's very precise and as you would expect. But yeah, that's kind of my general takeaway, and I prefer the ending from the film.
Yeah, well, so does the author. I think from memory, he's actually said that who is it? David Fincher did the ending of the film better than he could finish the book. I agree that it's a little bit less rambly and it's a little bit more on point in the film, but I do think that kind of comes with the writing style because it's more stream of consciousness. You have that rambling nature, so it is kind of deliberate, but understandable. It's different viewpoints, isn't it? I can appreciate both of them. We'll keep comparisons to the film to a minimum, but they're inevitably going to come up.
Not by me, they won't, because I still haven't watched it.
Yes, aside from the one person that hasn't seen it. Well, I'm assuming one person. So who wants to step up and? What was that, sorry?
Sorry. Oh, just I'm the only one who's only seen 20 minutes of the film, right? Because my date screamed out.
Oh,
this really sucks, and that was the movie for us if we left the cinema.
Yeah, I have strong feelings about this book. It's very, very dark and very pointless and very, very nihilistic. But we can get into that in more depth later.
Yeah, I haven't got a great deal of preamble with this book, to be honest, because I feel like there's going to be plenty of meat in the discussion of the text. So let's
it's an extremely Gen X kind of book.
Yes, yeah, it's well, in previous discussions that we had, the thing that keeps popping to mind for me was the Smashing Pumpkins songs, "Bullet with Butterfly Wings." The line. Despite all my rage, I'm still just a rat in a cage. That kind of faux anarchy, 90s resistance when they're trying to fight against the system, quote unquote, but don't know what the system is and what they're trying to fight. And even if they could bring something down, have no idea what they're going to put in its place. I think this book is a perfect encapsulation of that kind of 90s mindset.
Yes.
But I do think that the author was self-aware.
Just nihilistic objections to everything.
Mm-hmm.
I found the main character a lot more kind of childish in his outlook than in the film. I don't know whether it just because it came across stronger or whether it was always there. I don't know. It just seemed like he was a bit more. I don't know, like his ideas were too, very basic in the book.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially the fatherhood element is more prominent as well. And again, this goes with a book being a different type of media. You can delve into the character's mind a bit more than you can in the film. So some of those paternal conflicts that he has can be more center stage.
There are some important themes.
Oh, sorry, carry on.
Raised. Just
what was that, sorry? Justine? Okay, I'm gonna move on.
There are
I
some
think you
very
might have just cut
important
out.
themes
There
raised
we are.
by the book.
Yes, yeah. Let's go on to.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yeah,
I just wanted to raise as very important themes, but okay. The themes are important. Some of the, fatherhood in particular, but it doesn't have any answers for us apart from destroying everything.
Yeah, that is basically the answer to every single issue brought up. Is, well, we'll just tear it down. And I say it's a 90s mindset, but it's not like that's gone away. We'll try and keep relatively low levels of spice in the discussion, but bring down everything and put nothing up in its place is certainly not a mindset that's gone away from the public consciousness. So
there was a lot of destroying history, which I don't really remember.
Yep.
I didn't get, which I didn't really remember from the film. I know we're trying to keep comparisons down, but it's related.
It does seem to be a pastiche of different kind of reactionary things. So there's against culture, against you have part of the environmental movement in there when he's talking about when Tyler is talking about things. It's some part is like almost religious cult-like behavior. So it's really a pastiche of different kind of movements that you see. Like they don't have anything of their own. They just copy from other movements. It's like the book says, a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, there are certain lines that could have almost been pulled out of Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. Like, there's almost a neo-Ludditism lurking in parts of Tyler, where because he as that part of his psyche is able to operate in a world where civilization has crashed. He doesn't want to put anything in its place. Actually, we haven't actually given a brief summary of what the plot is. Who wants to give a summary of the plot? For anyone that doesn't know it out there.
Somebody who works in some shitty job at a car manufacturer, really one of the shittiest jobs. He's unhappy with his life and he can't sleep. So he starts visiting all these help groups, these support groups, where he basically fakes. But yeah, he's finally getting in touch with his emotions. And then at one point, this woman shows up and she messes up everything. That's basically the introductory summary of it.
Yeah,
Yes,
he messes up everything by watching him and making him unable to experience anything. Or he's faking something, but he wants to be able to fake it and be believed.
Yeah, but if she's there, then he can't lie to himself. That's the point.
And yeah, he knows that she's on to him because they're both visiting these groups. There is a reference to her having a cancer scare, right? But so is she not
her story started that she discovered that she thought it was a lump somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then she saw like people without health insurance, how they were helped, and she said, I don't want to do that. So she basically chose to just let it grow and just die that way. So that's her path of self-destruction.
Well, the protagonist also has a cancer scare as well, which I think that motif of having near-death experiences as a way of finding a route to existentialism is used a lot.
Yeah. Only his scare lasts like a couple of minutes because for this is not in the movie, but so he's at some kind of medical school to have a wart removed, and then while his wart is being removed, they see that he has this weird mole on his feet in the shape of Australia and New Zealand, and this attracts the
birthmark.
Yeah, birthmark. Yeah, and this attracts the attention of a lot of doctors because it looks like he has a new form of cancer, and they're really interested in it in a really clinical way. and then it just turns out it's just a regular birthmark. So he was interesting for like 10 minutes. And he was special and dying, and everybody was listening to him for 10 minutes, and then everybody started discarding him when it was just a birthmark. We don't care.
Yeah, everybody was really excited, weren't they? Because they thought they were going to get you to investigate this new form of cancer that was becoming, popular.
Yeah, it's basically the highest level of victim
Status.
Yeah, victim status that you can get is like, I'm on the brink of death, so everyone needs to show me affection.
Yeah, that's what he says. When everybody thinks you're dying, then everybody will listen to you instead of just waiting for their turn to speak.
Exactly, yeah. In the groups, right, you actually get everyone's attention if they really think you're dying and that your time has come.
Anyway, so let's pull back a minute and just cover some of the background. Like I say, I don't want to do too much preamble on it. I've put a quote there that I think sums up his mentality and what you can see coming through in the characters in Fight Club. It is a more existential view of the world, but he uses it in a much more productive way than anyone in the book does. And
that's my main criticism of the book is, if it was written by a guy whose objective and goal is, to write something that will live forever, that is not in any way, shape, or form mirrored by anyone in the book. In fact, the book is nihilistic to the extreme. It's not trying to create something; it's trying to destroy something forever.
Well, the character is. I wouldn't.
Yeah, maybe the author.
The main character is, but not everybody in the book is that way.
Yeah, the author is not necessarily endorsing that perspective, right? But
no, I think he's self-aware throughout, knowing that. Well, I watched. There's a very good documentary, although it's very dated, called "Postcards from the Future," and it basically is his book reading tour after half a dozen books have come out, and it's good for some of his speeches. I do admire his mindset and his writing style, and he says at one stage that there's not a single character he's written bar one that he actually likes, and the reason he enjoys writing characters that he disagrees with is because it forces you to view the world through their mindset and to justify their opinions through their mindset. So I don't think he is endorsing anything that's happening in the book, and I do think it's there as a condemnation of this worldview. And
well, then the exercise is entirely nihilistic in the extreme, because he's designing and creating things he inherently dislikes intensely for no practical purpose whatsoever, because there's nothing in the book, there's no subtext, there's no third party, there's no observer, there's no narrator, there's nothing that condemns any of the actions of the characters. In fact, the entire book is written from the perspective of exaltation of those characters and their actions.
Yeah, but still, their results, like generally, if you were to read the book, you would not think like, oh yeah, I want to live that life.
There's a lot of people who did. It spawned an entire movement.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with it. I agree that I don't think it's a flaw that there's no one in it that criticizes it, because it's a fallen world in which it's based in, and so people are clinging to anything that could be offered to them as a form of meaning. So the criticism has to come from the reader, and I agree that it depends entirely on who goes into it, how they're going to interpret everything.
But there was a lot of that feeling in at that time when it came out of the the corporate drone, like the Matrix and stuff like that, and various office space. I don't know. There seemed to be a lot of stuff about at that time. The guy working in the cubicle,
Falling Down, which I recently watched.
Yeah, Falling Down. Well, these people who not falling down really, but those other kind of films, like the person's doing quite well, I know in Falling Down he's been sacked, hasn't he? But in the other films, they're generally doing quite well on paper. Like the things that you were told when you were a teenager were the things to aim for, and you get there in your early 30s or whatever and realise, maybe that wasn't the thing to stick to.
Do you think contemporary corporations, with their sort of informal culture and kind of efforts to, make people feel creative, or some, even social justice to some degree, do you think this is an effort to like redress this critique?
I definitely think it is, but it's still, even when it's not physical, it's still material, if that makes sense. It's all very surface level. Even when they're saying, this is a place for you to relax, and it may not be material in the sense of here's just objects that we're giving you, although that is quite often done as well. But even when it's saying, here's like an entertainment space where you can socialize and things, it's all very surface level. They try and address it, but it's skin deep.
It's all very manufactured. It doesn't have any uniqueness to the experience, which makes it memorable. And even if they have an entertainment, it's like, oh, here are the game consoles, and then as soon as you start playing on them, then it's like, yeah, you're not working, so why are you playing on them?
Yeah, it's like a pastiche of fun. It's saying, it's like going to Disneyland and thinking that you're actually in Las Vegas.
It's actually working.
It's the
working in Disneyland.
insincere American culture, isn't it?
It's not organic. It's fundamentally inorganic. It's manufactured. It's constructed, and it's obviously constructed.
It's it's one of the themes in the book. I think is corporate conformity versus creative destruction. So on one side you have his corporate life, which is very, very strict, and everybody's in some kind of uniform, and that he's doing his office job, and you see him actually becoming creative, the narrator, in finding ways into how to annoy his co-workers by writing haikus and doing other stuff. And this is way in the beginning, before they go full on Project Mayhem. But you see that his creativity is trying to find a way out of this, and there's nothing in this corporate culture which values his personality, his uniqueness, his creativity.
Yeah, I mean, even though we're still on this slide, do you want to just go into what happens after he meets Tyler Durden? Let's quickly skip through the slides and then get to the characters, so that we can give a bit more detail on the plot, and then go into them a bit more thoroughly. So one of the few notes I just wanted to say is that the author is a gay man, and I don't know if you can tell from the description of some of the characters, but do you think it influenced the book at all?
No.
I'd be more interested to know if he had a strong father presence. That would be more.
That would be more interesting.
He had.
I didn't pick it up.
Yeah, so he did, but his father was actually murdered, and I don't know if it was before or after the release of the book. He had quite a troubled life in terms of family relationships, because his grandparents were a murder-suicide, and then his father, a few years later, was killed, like brutally murdered. So I don't remember if it was before or after the publication of the book, though.
Well, I mean, it's a perfect reflection. Being a gay man is a perfect reflection of the nihilism inherent in the book, because gay men don't have kids, so they create nothing.
Yeah. I see what you're going for. What's the dual income? What's that term that they use?
No kids.
Dinks. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I imagine
suppose,
that
historically they have channeled.
Go on, Justine.
Historically they have channeled their creativity into art, which, if you can live a disciplined life, I think that is a decent trade-off.
Well, to prove this point, let's look at who influenced the author. And notice how I'm using that because I hate pronouncing his surname. I'm pretty sure it's Palahniuk, but I might be wrong. So on his influences, you've got Foucault, who obviously took it to the extreme, his sexuality influencing his his constructivism and existentialism. But also the third guy in with glasses. That was his mentor. I know very little about him, but he was also a gay writer who focused on like transgressive fiction. Tom Spanbauer. I'm not familiar with anything.
And then Camus.
Yeah, so Camus as well. You can definitely see the absurdist nature of the book, where he's got that influence.
Is he a Californian type person?
He's from Oregon, if I remember correctly, but I think he's travelled around quite a lot.
He has a modest background in Oregon.
Yeah, and obviously the final one I've got on there is Bret Easton Ellis, which I've not actually read. American Psycho. We should probably cover that at some stage because everyone says nothing but good things about it. So, yeah, I just wanted to move straight onto that one when it came to describing the transition from gay authors to existential writing. Yeah. I agree that they quite often use this as a vessel.
I mean, the existentialism comes through strongly, and I was wondering sort of what has he added here. I mean, the fighting motif, I suppose, is kind of, and the theme about fatherhood and masculinity. These are sort of specific, a little more specific to our time.
Yeah, he talks a lot about what it is to be a man. Well, I don't know whether he mentions it exactly, but you know, the whole the remaining men together the group are all men without testicles, essentially, and you know they're in the group, you know, that he goes to where they all hug and everything. And you know, and then after the fight clubs have all been formed, he doesn't know because he hasn't been at the specific group they've been at, but they've all joined. They've all left the hugging, caring kind of group and joined the fight club where they're all presumably punching each other out every night.
The longer I'm looking at this slide, Foucault just looks identical to this other guy here. If you just put on some hair, I wonder if. Anyway, yeah, moving on to that. So, again, briefly, just on the legacy of the book, we unfortunately aren't being joined by Mr. Bloke, but he found that there was an app, a Tinder-like app for fighting called Rumbler, inspired by Fight Club, which I found just. I mean, I'm not surprised, but it was just
I see that somebody else is stealing my my merits again.
was it you that posted that? Was it?
Yeah, I posted that one.
Yeah, sorry. Well, he's not here, so I won't let him have credit anyway, even if it was him. So that was an interesting thing to see. The other things I just put on there, obviously, the film is the biggest. Is the biggest legacy that it's left behind, the biggest transition into another media as well. Film is obviously fantastic. Everyone should go watch it. And I think some people on the panel might think that you only need to watch the film as opposed to reading the book. The other things I just wanted to bring up is it left a lot of little memes that are used throughout a lot of literature, like the first rule of X is you don't speak about X. All those kind of things that. Left behind a lot. It's also influenced a lot of later unreliable narrations, but that is about all I wanted to mention on that.
The afterword, where he discusses all these things that have happened in the wake of Fight Club. In my edition, there's an afterword.
Oh yeah, there is.
He kind of lists all this stuff, and I thought it sounded like some of it was real and some of it was imaginary.
Yes, well, some people did actually go on to set up their own fight clubs afterwards. But again, like you say, how many of those are just people LARPing, and how many actually did do that? Who knows? I do wonder if it influenced the popularity of MMA and things going forwards, because a big part of the book is obviously violence as a way of, as a cathartic release. and it can be expressed in a healthy manner, but obviously in the book it's really not. But I do wonder if people channeled that energy into something more productive, like martial arts and things.
Do we think someone like Joe Rogan was really influenced by this book?
Yeah. I mean, there's an interview with Joe Rogan and Chuck Palahniuk, and it is a good chat. You should definitely listen to it. And I do think that he kind of expressed it exactly the same way, and said that Joe Rogan said that he had never seen anything capture the energy and the cathartic release of being in a fight as well as the book. But obviously, again, it's not done in a particularly healthy or constructive manner. But it does that spirit of the fight is really captured well in it.
Well,
Especially. Sorry, carry on.
It has kind of the same function as when we did Brave New World. We were talking about the VPS, the Violent Passion Surrogate, where people were just angry and let out all their negative feeling they experienced in order to keep them functioning in society. And I think these fights are doing something similar. They're also similar to the ritual you had with the Savage, where he was hit with a whip to prove that he was a man. And this has the same thing. If you fight in Fight Club, you don't have to win, but the fact that you have fought in Fight Club, that makes you brothers with the other people. It just proves that you are a man. And
it makes the monotony of everything else in life just much easier to bear.
Yeah, he describes it as that you have something to live for. So it's a form to give. It's not really constructive, but it does give something to construct your life around.
Well, one of the main themes in it, wasn't it? It's with the middle children of history. That line, and that we've had nothing particular to fight for.
They didn't have
generations.
They didn't have their own war. So there was no point where they could go out and obtain glory, as some might describe it.
Yeah, that passage almost went a bit Avolian. It was, this is nothing but a spiritual battle that we can fight in this day and age. So it kind of goes down that path. It's one of the few sections in which Tyler. I do wonder how much Tyler is just blurting out things that sound good in a way of justifying the actions, in a way of just justifying the destruction. But that part is at least accurate, that we are not in a material war, but a spiritual war.
We've had these series of neocon wars where you watch them on TV like they're a video game or something, right? Like Gulf. I remember this with Gulf War 1 and 2, and this here. I mean, you have real soldiers like getting their limbs blown off, but most people are not engaged in those wars. It's just something entertainment,
Yeah, you had General Schwarzkopf just giving a presentation every time and showing how the bombs hit and things like that, and it was like a recap of some battle royale match that you were watching.
He was the commentator.
Something really grotesque about that, having this incredible force, but for us it becomes like a spectator sport or something.
Yeah, it's just the idea that there's all these people that have the potential to do great things, but they've just not been given any opportunity whatsoever. The idea First World War. There's a lot of people that say the First World War created a generation of working class poets, and it allowed them to do these, to experience these things and do these things, whereas we've had none of that. And the closest thing we seem to be getting is the pandemic, and that's great.
Yeah, the flip side of that is that World War One also wipes out, half of the word of mouth, like oral tradition from families and works and tradition. It did create poets, but it took out a lot more poets than it created, I imagine.
Seems to have been the beginning of the end for our.
Yeah, it could definitely be argued that. Right. So onto the characters. So, do you want to freelance? I suppose if you want to just finish off on the story, so we can talk about the characters. What happens after?
Okay, so the narrator meets Tyler Durden, and Tyler Durden. He meets him actually after his condominium has been blown up. And then he met Tyler Durden before, so he has his phone number, and he calls him just basically to ask, like, I'm in shit, I need somewhere to stay, because he also lost his bag and he doesn't have any money, so he doesn't have his credit card, he has nothing. And then they go out for some beers, and then Tyler asks him to hit him because he's never been in a fight before. And that's basically the start of Fight Club, because they realize that being hit like that has something. It's like experiencing something. And while they're doing that, other people are watching them, and they basically want to fight as well. So they start basically a club to do that, which is the first Fight Club. And this basically helps him to deal with his for him to help deal with his insomnia. So he leaves his old life behind. His work is starting to fall apart. His shirt and trousers are full of blood. And at some point they ramp it up and they start Project Mayhem, where they just start vandalizing stuff. So they do it starts out with some pranks like custards and ATMs, and at some point they're breaking in and blowing up stuff. And then at some point Tyler is gone from his life, and he has to find out where Tyler is. And then at some point everybody keeps calling him sir, and he has the idea that he's already been everywhere. And then he starts to realize that he actually is Tyler Durden, that it's the same person. So while he's asleep, Tyler is running around in his body. So it's some kind of mental disorder that he's having that's created this. And
he had a psychotic break.
Yeah, so basically Tyler is something he constructed in order to deal with the world, because he couldn't do it himself. He basically describes himself as a little boy looking for somebody to take care of him, and he basically constructed Tyler to do that. So Tyler is everything he doesn't dare to be.
As I was reading, I kept trying to think, what would this be like if I didn't know that these two were the same? You know.
I feel like
let's ask the one person that didn't know.
Yeah, I guess this is where I come in. I think I actually started suspecting all the way back when they mentioned that, like, Tyler and what was the girl's name?
Marla Singer.
Marla.
Yeah, that Tyler and Marla are never in the same room together. I think at that point I was already like, okay, something's going on here. So I don't think I quite had connected the dot that they were the same person, but that's the first time that I was like, this is going to be something.
Yeah, I feel like the bit where he meets Tyler for the first time on the beach it's almost like, you know, like later in the book where he's talking about things that have been spliced out of other things and then inserted into the main story. That really felt like it had been spliced out of something else and just shoved in. I don't know. Whereas it's a lot more kind of organic in the film. I felt like it really kind of like jumped out at me. I don't know whether it's just because it's so different from the film, but I think even if I'd just read the book, all of a sudden he's on a beach. He's, you know, I don't know.
Well,
it seems
the book is really fragmentary. So if you read the book, he really jumps from ID to ID. It's really stream of consciousness.
Yeah, but it never goes like, oh, I went on a holiday and went to the beach and I was on the beach. This guy, just jumps to I was on a beach. You know,
normally it's really analytic. So he's talking about things and things that happen and how they came to be, and suddenly it's a description of a different location. And I think it's one of the first times that happens, because he never talks about there was never like an episode like, oh, when I was young I was there or I did that. It's always like describing how to make bombs and things like that. And
yeah, it's not very linear, is it? The film's very linear in comparison. But I felt like that kind of it mixes in well with the whole splicing things into the main film. Like I felt like that was quite. Yeah,
so Tyler has this habit. He works in a cinema as a projectionist, and he has this habit of splicing pornographic images into films just for the hell of it, really, right? And that works in a lot of ways. Yeah, the idea that, especially if you are an insomniac, and if you ever had this experience of what it's like to be awake when sleep is intruding, you know, and you have like slightly hallucinogenic experiences, which is a bit like that, right? Like, what the hell is that? You know?
Yeah.
It's like the flashes you have in the beginning of the movie. It's like you see this black flash and out of the corner of your eyes. and that happens when you have to deal with insomnia. But also the splicing of the movie frames is one of his early creative destruction things. He's modifying things just to kind of annoy people, because the result of the frames that are inserted into the movie is that people are watching Bambi, or when the cat and the squirrel come together in Act 2 and start singing. You don't realize that you've seen it, but everybody is like feeling really uneasy because you just saw something really gross.
The kids start crying and no one knows why.
Yeah.
The passage of time as well. Obviously, the splicing element and the passing of time is a big indicator. And the very first thing that happens on the beach between the narrator and Tyler is him making a middle finger, which depends on the time reaching a certain stage. So it could be a minute of perfection where it looks this perfect middle finger in which you'll sit in the middle of it. Just on the insomnia point, I just want to say that this for me is one of the best books best pieces of media that has ever expressed that kind of, the term that he uses where he describes it as being a copy of a copy of a copy, where it's this combination of this deep insomnia with this monotonous job where you almost, and that's why the fight becomes so cathartic, because he gets to a stage where everything almost feels holographic and everything is not quite real because nothing is happening in life. You're half desensitized because of the insomnia, so your senses aren't ever truly switched on as they should be, and everything's a bit hazy, combined with the fact that you've got this 9 to 5 that is consistent. It's like watching Groundhog Day, but that is your life.
Yeah. There's also, and it kind of talks about what's the point in being if that is the case, and they talk about all the things that you do every day, like go to the gym, or wear clean clothes, or trim your nails, or wherever. And then when Fight Club comes along, that gives them the reason to do these things, like these things that they've been doing all along, just because that's the done thing. And all of a sudden, it gives a reason for living and doing all these things that you do generally.
When I was a kid, there was a lot of talk about subliminal messaging in film anyway, or in they said that they would splice in adverts into the films. I never really knew whether that was really true or whether it worked or whatever, but this is like an inversion of that, right?
Yeah, like you get a flash of a night tick or something.
Yeah, you're supposed. Or you're supposed to get some popcorn or some beverage or whatever it is that they're trying to sell you.
Smoke cigarettes.
Yeah. I think this is the idea. This is Tyler Durden fighting back against the corporate types who have been doing this kind of thing. Maybe.
Yeah, it's his. He's fighting against the corporate conformity. At least that's the way it feels to me. And he does this by becoming a creative destruction artist, and he takes this to an extreme.
Yeah, that's why the character is so frustrating, because the fight is in some ways admirable, where this kind of corporate culture, I can understand the resistance that is being put up, but obviously there's nothing being put in its place, and that's, I think, where Brandig has so many issues with it, and I agree, but I think that's intentional. So I think it's kind of
it's nothing but postmodernist deconstruction. There's no there's no reconstruction or building of anything. It's just
I agree.
Poking holes in things for the sake of poking holes in things.
I agree with you on that fact that there's nothing to put it in place. But on the other hand, it is a good book that shows what happens when you have a bunch of boys or men without a lot of paternal guidance. If you put them together, what happens? Then they will become a roving band of destructive monkeys.
Yeah. It's taking the watch apart and saying, well, it doesn't work, but then no one knows how to put it back together again, because they were born and raised in this system that is never going to teach them, and none of them have the will or the knowledge to take them forward. So
but that's the thing that they do. That's the worst part of it.
Do you think so? What do you think, Tyler? Or the
take a look at the soap company.
Ability. Yeah, but what is that? what does that actually
Take a
bring
look
to
at-
the table?
The soap company is a very profitable economic enterprise, and that does provide enough money to run Project Mayhem.
Mhm.
It also provides an opportunity for people to get, trained up and learn all sorts of valuable, useful skills. Take a look at what the Space Monkeys are doing.
Like the garden.
I'm not saying that they don't achieve anything. It's just that it's very unguided.
My point is they have demonstrated capacity and ability to achieve large things, and they use it to blow things up.
Yeah.
To deconstruct the society.
Yeah,
There's demonstrative, proven ability to have a positive, constructive impact on the world within the context of the book that would solve all of these, existential problems and give people purpose and value in life, and they use it to make dick pics.
No, see, I disagree. I think it's the opposite. I think that the soap company is them expressing it in the only way that they know, because that's all that they're used to. They have the capacity to do things in the job positions that they were already in. So they basically leave one monotonous job and go and join up into another monotonous job that doesn't accomplish anything. I feel like the soap company and all the actions that they take are just as mind-numbing, but they at least it's an expression that they are at least choosing, as opposed to what
there's no
the man is imposing on them. But it's still nothing. They're still ultimately doing nothing, like spiritually and invigorating or something. It's still just making bars of soap.
But in like the corporate world,
Okay, I think that is maybe a bit of the way the whole Project Mayhem and everything comes about. It's like it starts from a kind of unconscious repressing of all these feelings of it being useless, of it being a corporate drone, of being a corporate drone, and he kind of continues with his life, and all these people kind of continue with their life and repress this side that wants meaning, that wants to have a more intense, more everything life. And then after it being repressed a while, well, in the narrator, it literally becomes manifested as this Tyler Durden character. But yeah, I don't think it's just they wanted to change this and therefore they changed it in the most horrible way possible. No, they felt like that something was wrong, didn't act on it, and then they started making things worse for themselves and for everyone around them. I don't think it's just the part that they how do you put it? That they, I don't think it's just the part that they rebelled. It's the way in which they approach their kind of rebellion.
So even there's a couple of bits where they do try and help people, aren't there? But even the way they do it's a bit around the houses.
And it's shallow. The help they're providing is shallow.
Well, no, the help they provide to the guy who's working in the gas shop.
It's very shallow because they're basically threatening him, like, okay, if you don't do this, then we'll kill you.
Yeah, no, that bit's shallow, but the idea that he'll go away from there a new person and actually sort his life out.
But he won't.
Something. Well, the idea is that he will.
I understand that's the idea, but the entire point that I'm making is that this is nothing but a Potemkin village of meaning.
Yes.
This is the entirety of the book is surface level meaning painted on an abyss of despair. And it goes back to the lack
That's what makes it so good.
There's a telling line about a generation of people who have been brought up by television to think they can be millionaires and rock stars, whatever, and then they're bitter because they can't. I mean, instead of having this sort of empty goal of being millionaires and rock stars, you feel that instead of everybody wanting to be at the top and that people taking pride in becoming competent in doing what they're good at would be closer to the answer, right?
I think they don't have any ideals to live for. The 90s and especially the past 30 years, was like felt like we've reached some peak, some apex in like comfort and civilization. And I mean, everybody has an iPhone or at least a mobile phone. Everybody big screen television. Obesity is a problem. Things like that. So what do you live for? What's the problem you're going to solve? And this feels like that good times create weak men. And to me, these men in Project Mayhem feel very weak because they don't have any morals to live by.
Yeah.
So they will cling on to anything that anybody says. So some false prophet comes along, or somebody who sounds like a prophet, somebody who sounds like Tyler Durden, who just quotes something which sounds wise, which is almost like the corporate experiences which we talked about, but then thrown together. It becomes very attractive to them, and this feels to me more like a cautionary tale, because when I first watched it and was thinking about it, it really spoke to me, like, okay, this is really what's going on. I am really chasing shoes with a certain brand and expensive stuff, and then you end up buying stuff which you don't need with money you don't have to impress people that don't like you.
That's how I read it, and I think this is where I differ with Brandig. I think this might be where the crux of the disagreement is, that I read it as a cautionary tale because these men are looking for a father figure or a god figure, which in the book they kind of draw comparisons to both being one and the same in some ways. And in this world, they found Tyler Durden, and that was all they had, so that's what they clung to. But it doesn't portray that as being a particularly good thing. Whereas in ours, it could be that you have Jordan Peterson that you cling to, and it's exactly the same men that would be attracted to Tyler as would be attracted to Jordan Peterson, because they are broken men that need that father figure or that god figure.
Where are the women? I mean, in the entire book, the only female I can recall is Marla
and Chloe.
Are there? And Chloe, yes. So, I mean, none of the space monkeys have wives or families. None of the men in Fight Club apparently have wives or families.
No, I mean, if Brandig had a version, presumably he'd be hallucinating a nice wife and a family, and he'd have a nursery club or something.
That's not far off the book. Off
that reminds me of that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. What was it? Shutter Island.
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison, actually.
So yeah, you.
Well, or American Psycho, for that matter. They're all.
I think that would have equal validity to be its own artwork, but I think that this isn't that, and I think it still holds value in not being it. That probably has a lot to do with it, yeah. But
I didn't know he was gay until you told me about it just now, which
I think it doesn't matter if he's either gay or if it's some kind of incel, so somebody who's not in a relationship with a woman. I mean, then basically the behavior would be kind of the same. You don't have.
He's gay, and he's also seemingly, according to the facts you were talking about before, he's had a lot of loss as well, which could make you quite nihilistic, I suppose.
Yeah. I in some of the interviews, he's kind of said that, yeah, this probably is. I don't know. He's frustrating because he is influenced by these kind of postmodern thinkers, very left wing. The Marxists of the Frankfurt School and everything. But he's aware of the pitfalls, and he's self-referential with it, and he tries to develop it.
Yeah, but he seems to put his money where his mouth is as well, unlike most people of that
yes.
kind of ilk. Like he'll actually go to workshops and teach people, underprivileged people how to write and things like that. After watching his Joe Rogan interview, anyway, he came across very well in that, I thought, anyway.
Yeah, so he probably is not to psychoanalyze everything that we come across, but maybe he is expressing some kind of pain that he has repressed from the loss of his family member, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of addresses that, and he said, yeah, maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but, this is the art that I'm creating. Yeah, but regardless of whether the source of the material, this is the material that we have. And I think it's valuable to have the Stepford Wives version that we could have in as an alternative, or I think this is also valid because it's a cautionary tale.
I like the fact that he's drawing attention to these questions. I think that's a positive. I heard about Fight Club, and I mentioned the other day the early stages of my red pilling about feminism, and and I thought this seems exciting, right? That somebody's talking about men brought up, by single mothers and what kind of effect this might have. So, even if he doesn't perhaps have all the answers that we might have, I feel it's a contribution to gesture it.
Yeah, raising the question can be just as important in a certain environment as providing the right answer. Tyler does not have the right answers, but he does raise some of the valuable questions.
Yeah. The theme of death is obviously very, raging through. And I think there are two different reasons, at least, for the strong focus on death. One is it's a side of depression, right? One kind of symptom of depression is that every biological fact seems to point towards death. And the other side is, as he said, our culture, and American culture in particular, is very much in denial of death. So there's a kind of, it's very painted over. And so maybe death is sort of rushing back, through the floorboards kind of thing.
Yeah, well, let's not draw comparisons to something that we could do that might be bringing death to the forefront of people's minds again, regardless of how accurate it might be. But I completely agree. And the other thing about death is that with his influences coming from absurdism, a strong feature of that, and I think a direct quote from Camus, if not it's paraphrasing, is that every day you have to figure out why you shouldn't kill yourself, basically. Because if there isn't a reason, then you may as well just end it.
Ta-da! The lesson of Fight Club.
I don't know. I mean, when the film came out, anyway, I watched the film and I felt like it kind of spoke to me, but I don't know quite why. I mean, I wasn't old enough to reach that point where you have to start regretting your life, and I didn't have an absent father, and but I don't know. Even so, the whole I don't know. It still spoke to me anyway. I felt.
When I saw the movie for the first time, I thought that Marla was a real insane psycho. And I was like, when I saw it for the second time, I was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's not her.
Yeah, I knew enough crazies to know that.
Yeah, I've known such women.
Yeah, when I saw the movie, I took an entirely different lesson away from it than when I read the book. The culmination. Well, the culmination of the movie was uplifting. It was there was an alternative that was being presented, that was being built, and the foundation had been laid for something.
Yeah, you could also you could imagine at the end of the film that he's got rid, the narrator's got rid of Tyler, and he's got the girl, and the things have blown up, but they're okay, and you could imagine them going off and maybe
building something.
But obviously that's not what happens in the book.
So what is the big difference between the endings?
Well, it's the ending of them.
Tyler's goal in the movie is to destroy the credit card building, so reset credit card debt. While in the book he wants to blow up the tallest building in the world and topple it and let it fall on top of the American History Museum. And it's the way it's described kind of reminds me of a rocket, which these rockets which launch from a launch pad but then fail and fall over. And so this tower was supposed to fall over, burning on top of this museum, destroying basically culture.
They wanted to get rid of history.
That is the most upsetting part of the book for me.
They want to have a great reset in some ways.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so both of them do, but one of them is like most people see credit card debt as something like they want to get rid of. It would be a better world if we wouldn't have it.
Yeah.
While if we would get rid of a museum, you could see it as something bad. Like, why would you destroy it? And this is also in the book. He says like, I want to smash up the Elgin marbles and wipe my ass with the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, this
which is kind of hard to do because it's painted on wood. But okay, we can't be too much.
I mean, he's collapsing together things that have, in fact, really are not related. Such, our collective past and corporate culture. These are not same thing.
But to him it feels like that because that collective culture has been packaged over and over again by corporations, and that's also why he says that when he says like everything is named after English towns like New York and stuff, because the English discovered everything. Well, if everything would be discovered now, it would be called the IBM stratosphere. So it would be named after corporations. So for him, the corporations are the things that are making the culture right now. So for him, it's interlinked.
Simply because they reproduce these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they persist beyond death of the individual too.
And in that way, they create meaning as it is. As in, if you, one way to give meaning to your life is to create something that will persist beyond your own death, right? Mm-hmm. And some form of that is having children. Another one would be creating art, or
that's why I put this quote here.
Yeah, or in some cases, like the guy who tried to smash up La Pieta is destroying art. If you're the guy who destroys art, you become famous as well. So that's also a way to persist beyond your own death.
Iconoclasm is an easier way of getting fame.
And it's one way to, because I think it's a quote, what's worse, that God doesn't love you or not to exist at all. Mm-hmm. So it would be better to destroy something so God would at least notice you.
Because let's move on to him with that quote.
The other difference, because you're asking what the difference was, the Marla is at the help groups when she realizes that he's going to blow up the tower. So she leaves the self-help group and everybody follows her, and they actually end up saving him. So he does actually get saved by the self-help groups in the end.
Yeah, that's also because in the movie he quits the self-help groups as soon as he starts Fight Club, because it's a replacement. While in the book he keeps going to those self-help clubs still to deal with his insomnia. So Fight Club is not the cure for him. It's just another stopgap, and that's also why Tyler invents Project Mayhem for him. Well, actually, he does it himself, but in order to get the edge again, because Fight Club doesn't work for him anymore. While in the movie, he's kind of oblivious to why Project Mayhem starts. It just starts, and from that moment, he's more or less a kind of a spectator to the whole thing. Well,
yeah. I just want to touch on that quote that you said a moment ago, where it's better to destroy God's creation than be ignored, or be hated by God than be indifferent.
Yeah.
Maybe it's heresy to draw this kind of comparison, but I just had like Paradise Lost in my head when going through it. Like, he's quite a Luciferian character, not in a classic sense, but Lucifer in the sense of that kind of pride leading to his fall, and actively trying to work against God as a way of getting noticed, basically.
Yeah. Does that make sense? God doesn't even want him, does he? In all likelihood.
Yeah, it's basically I will actively work against God as a way of as a way of being noticed by him, as opposed to just being the indifference in the world. So he's like the 90s version of Lucifer.
I was going to say, I don't even think he wants God to notice him, does he? It's just a case of God doesn't care about me, so I'll just do it.
No, I do think it's a case of where he's trying to get God to notice him, because it's the same what you see with some children who want to get attention from their parents. They become destructive because their normal methods don't work.
And when
negative attention is attention.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's quite often the easiest way to get it, and that's what leads to such unhealthy behaviour.
Well, some children get attention by doing good things, and some negative.
but the negative one is easier to do. The way down is always easier than the way up.
Mhm.
So
Apparently,
you see,
second children tend to try and get attention by doing negative things, whereas first children
hey, I'm a
do
second
positive
child.
things. And
Yeah, same here.
apparently a lot of
It explains why you're on this stream.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of people in history, seemingly, who did things such as Napoleon, were second children. Or
Was the frustrated
after.
Austrian painter a second child?
Right, let me just make my other point before we get demonetized and banned off YouTube and everything. But just on the wanting attention from your parent by acting out as opposed to getting their approval. Again, if we go back to the fact that there's constant comparisons in the book between the father figure and God, then him trying to be that Luciferian character where he gets the disapproval of God is almost him being a petulant child acting out against the father as a way of gaining their attention.
Yeah, because he relates God to his father, and he's basically saying if
I'm going to throw my toys out the pram until you.
Yeah,
until you
what does that say about what does that say about God if God's fathers are models for God?
Mm-hmm. And it's also this. Sorry, you carry on.
I feel like the book does leave a crack in the window open for God, just because he raises these questions.
Yeah.
And he also cites the Bible a couple of times. In my father's house, there are many mansions. For example, there are some lines here and there, not just in a satirical way either.
Yeah, and I also think that that in the 90s you found a lot of people. Well, this kind of attitude can easily come about by there not being any strong leaders, and by, in some ways, because it was such a permissive society, and still is, but 90s in particular is where things started to really ramp up. They almost want someone to discipline them. This type of mindset. It's I'm going to push and push and push until you discipline me. Not even because they want to take things that far, but they need a strong authority above them to put them in their place. And if they can keep on pushing at an open door and nothing happens to them, this is what happens when you have an absent father, or what can happen is that there's been no discipline throughout their life, so they can go off the rails, and the state isn't disciplining them if they're going in one direction as opposed to another. So this is how you end up with a figure like this, where the world is his playground because there's not a strong authority figure to put him in his place, and whether that authority comes from an employer, a father, God. No one's been there to stop him and to set boundaries.
No, that's even it. I also have the feeling that sometimes when he mentions God, he actually means his father. So when he says, "Have you ever realized that God doesn't love you or didn't want you?" That if he would say, "Did you ever think that your father doesn't love you, didn't want you?" Actually, also makes a lot of sense. Because that's kind of the feeling I get, that he has a father, but that father franchises families. So that he starts a family, and after 6 years he moves on to another town and start a new family. So and he has some contact with it, but it doesn't give him any advice. It basically tells, just go to school and find a job and do this, and basically doesn't have any answers how to solve his life. And he feels really alone by this. So I think he somewhere he gets the feeling like, okay, I don't think my father really wanted me, because otherwise he would have stuck around.
Yeah, that back and forth with him and his father is actually what was in my head when I was drawing these comparisons, because as a way of rebelling against his father, he goes to university, doesn't he, or goes to college, and then calls his father and says, "Well, I've done that now. Now what?" And the father, he doesn't care. It was an act of rebellion, but the father just doesn't care that he's taken that route to try and rebel against him. So even him trying to act out and get his attention through a negative means is just resulting in his father still just being completely nonplussed by him.
So when he says absent fathers, I mean, in some cases it's literally absent fathers or dead fathers, or fathers that have been divorced out of the picture. But sometimes it's just fathers who are kind of emotionally,
they're in body but not in mind or spirit. What was the other thing I had down here? Oh, just a side note. This book is apparently the first usage of the term snowflake to refer to sensitive left-wingers.
Well, there's always been the idea that every snowflake is unique. I guess.
Yeah. There's a passage towards the end where one of the space monkeys says, "You are not a unique snowflake, and you're the byproducts of the radioactive waste of God's creations," and blah blah blah.
You are the same decaying organic matter as everything else.
Yeah.
That quote that you have there next to Tyler, it's only after you've lost everything that you're free to do anything, is also something that you would feel if you're stuck in the corporate treadmill. There are a lot of rules and there are a lot of meetings you have to go to, but it's all very constrained. It's all very, very, what do you call it? Manufactured. Just like you go to McDonald's, you only have 3 choices. So and it's keeping you down. So in order to be really free, you have to let go of everything that you have. And this is also symbolized in all the IKEA furniture that he has.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, I don't know whether that really works, because obviously, I don't know if any of you lot have got kids, but if you've got kids, you aren't free to do anything.
That's the point.
Yeah, well, this is why they throw
the entire lack of point.
They throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, but he's been, what he's lacking is meaning. It's not just the fact that he's got this job that's tying him down, which isn't seemingly tying him down, because at any point he could just leave it, and he doesn't have to go through all this to go and live in a house, in the crappy part of town, and do something.
It's more of a mental cage than an actual cage.
Yeah.
And that's the entire point, and at the core of the problem is his value structure is warped, and there's no effort made whatsoever to readjust it or realign it with a positive engagement with society.
What responsibilities does he have?
He has none.
Exactly. So there's nothing in his life that gives him meaning, and that's also what Jordan Peterson is saying. You have to take on as much responsibility as you can to give your own life meaning. So, and he doesn't do that.
Maybe we should do a re-edit and just insert Peterson into it. Like, now, boy,
Tyler Peterson.
Then you can end the film like an hour and a half earlier. Brandy would be happy.
The film just ends with the narrator going and stroking a cat and seeing a boy skateboarding, and just quite a wholesome ending.
Gets a girlfriend, has some kids.
But this is what I mean, that there's a father-shaped hole inside these broken men, and they will fill it with the first figure that comes along. And for some of them, it was Tyler Durden, so that's why they committed to Project Mayhem. But luckily now we have people that even, he's not perfect, and I think some people put him on a pedestal, which isn't even his own fault. He's just there saying his views and putting out material, but some people really do idolize him as a father. So it's healthier to latch on to him, but even so, it's still not ideal that they will just jump on any kind of figure that's going to fill that hole.
There.
You have to rescue your own father. That's also what one of the messages. So basically, you have to realize at one point that your father is not God. He's not perfect. So he has his own faults, and you have to rescue him in order to also fix the faults in yourself, because you're liable to repeat them. And that doesn't happen here because his father is completely absent. So and also because his father is somebody who just franchises and doesn't stick around and doesn't build anything, that also gives a bad role model to the narrator, who does exactly the same, but the results are different. But
next week we'll read Moby Dick.
Yeah, well, that's that father-shaped hole, or that projected deity or deification upon others, is the core principle in like being there, and other works of that nature. There's a lot of this is a common trope of the empty suit, the constructed man, the person who has no internal substance, but the substance is put upon them and created by their worshipers or their followers. And this is actually the core component of Tyler's existence. In as far as I'm aware, at least in the movie, but I'm fairly certain in the book, Tyler Durden is actually a real person who does exist physically, and he does meet the main character at that time. But everything thereafter is the main character just spontaneously, creating him as a foil for himself. He's a purely constructed character. He doesn't exist in any meaningful way.
That's possible. I don't know. I don't know if there's any evidence either way. The film in particular I don't know, because he's spliced into the footage before meeting him, so I don't know why he would be having these kind of hallucinations of this spliced image of this person before meeting him and deifying him.
Marla compares the situation to Psycho, but I was thinking Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, she uses that comparison as well, though, doesn't she? Dr. Jekyll and Jackass or something. I can't remember what she says.
Yeah, there's some pretty weak insults sometimes, like butt wipe. Who the hell uses that?
Yeah, it strikes me as being very Californian, that.
Well, it's also, again, quite childish, some of that. It's like this is the best they can come up with when they're insulting each other.
It's very childish.
So it just, again, lends itself to these people are just 30-year-old boys, which, again, is a way in which the narrator describes himself.
Yeah, I mean, and Tyler's idea of his absolute freedom is when basically society is completely collapsed and he's stalking a deer through the middle of Times Square or whatever it is. Whereas that he might consider that free, but what is the point? The point then just becomes living, doesn't it? For the sake of it, it's kind of
you become an animal.
We kind of read Brave New World, didn't we? And it's what is the point in living in general? Without without any meaning whatsoever. I mean, even if everything's reduced to zero and he's living off the land and what have you, I mean, there's still no point. I mean, what's the point in just killing things and eating things just to survive, to die, and leave nothing behind?
Maybe this says more about me, that most of the books we cover are about man's search for meaning.
But in none of these books, they don't have meaning well, they certainly didn't in Brave New World. I mean, they're just living for the sake of it, aren't they? Just to enrich the corporate machines.
Well, this is why
by people who will also die and leave nothing because everything's just created by the machine.
This is why this kind of mindset, again, some of the critiques that he makes are valid, but they throw the baby out with the bathwater with some of the critiques where, because I don't like this hierarchical structure, any form of hierarchy is oppression, and I need to and need to be completely destroyed. And then the minute they achieve something like that, they think, hang on a minute. I've lost the father figure, and so now I need to deify something else. So it's these kind of things where there's no nuance. It's like destroying history because they don't like parts of it. So they're just going to completely tear down any element of history so that they can try and rewrite it and create this blank slate man.
I mean, I don't even think they're thinking of rewriting it, are they? It's just like, let's destroy everything and just live off the land.
Yeah, so rewriting it as in we're now on day one. So it's
Yeah.
being written from now on.
But he doesn't even talk about rebuilding, though, does he? It's
No,
not like,
not at all.
oh,
No.
we'll knock this down and build something great.
but
We'll
can
just
you-
knock this down and just kick about for a bit until we all
Can,
die.
can you imagine now if you have like this group of these lost men, and then some army guy comes along and says we're going to build a literal army and we're going to go to war, and this gives meaning. That suddenly all these guys will join that army because it gives them something to live for.
Yeah.
The only difference is that this is like a guerrilla army and it's not a regular army. But
You'll just look at all the crappy causes everybody attaches themselves to. You know, I mean,
yeah,
there's
it's also
Yeah.
just an endless supply of pointless nonsense to get involved in, isn't there? I mean, let's face it.
It's a trap of low politics. And
Antifa.
yeah. Well, exactly your point, I think, that you're going to make. Go ahead, Justine.
Just Antifa kept coming to mind. Those type of
Yeah.
guys.
yeah.
The thing
How
is,
how is Project
you-
Mayhem different from Antifa?
well,
It
the thing
is.
if
I
you-
literally don't see any difference.
But
Yeah.
when Antifa say, we're against fascism because and it was started, during World War, the build up to World War II or whatever. It's like, yeah, but they weren't fighting against fascism per se. They were just one power. Fascism was another power, and they wanted the power.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. They weren't fighting it for some moral good. They were just fighting it because it was the other team, and they wanted to beat the other team.
It's a cause to cling on to try and not face the inevitability of your death. Now, I think that we see this everywhere, and it happens more on one side of the political aisle than the other, because you're more likely to find broken people on one side than the other. But you find it in every facet of life, because
I wouldn't say that simply because there are broken people on both sides of the aisle. It's just a mechanism of recruitment that is consistently utilized by a particular political movement that grants the opportunity for meaning outside of oneself without work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which is communism.
Well, it's the old argument. It's like you're feeling crappy about your life. You don't think you're doing very well. Well, you see those guys over there. They're the ones that have caused this. Mm-hmm. So let's go and
It's when you put X is the cause of all of my problems. That's when you know that you're probably going down a dangerous path. And
as long as X is not yourself. If X is yourself, you're absolutely fine.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you can be, but if you misinterpret that, then you can also be down a dark path. But that's
really what Tyler needed was a copy of Gulag Archipelago.
I think 12 Rules for Life would have been fine.
Yeah, he'd have caught with that one. Yeah, no, that'd have been grand.
It probably would take Solzhenitsyn's work and see it as a manual.
Yeah.
Make all these camps.
Heaven forbid he ever get a hold of a copy of Ordinary Men.
You're like, oh, these guys had it great.
Actually, now that I think about it, it's entirely possible he did read Ordinary Men, because take a look at what the Space Monkeys,
Yeah. Let's get them to do these smaller things to ensure that they're more closely bonded with the idea of Project Mayhem.
Ordinary Men. What is that?
It's a book about a police unit from Hamburg in the Second World War who did horrible things behind the in conquered areas in Poland. So they basically cleared out Jewish villages.
Right.
So
this idea of not being spicy has really gone out the window.
I'm trying to be politically correct somewhat.
we didn't write it.
The important lesson is that this police unit was made out of regular men. They didn't recruit like the psychos or something. And it actually turned out that the people who were, by the most normal people turned out to be the biggest psychos given the opportunity. And while people were thought who were unstable actually didn't want to do it, and they were put on like guard duty or something like that.
Yeah, well, people always come up with these nonsense statements like in World War I, people didn't necessarily aim at people. Like they didn't, it's hard to get a human to kill another human, and it's like,
You have to train them for it. That's why they.
Yeah, no, but how do you explain the numbers of deaths at the Somme if that's if that's the case? Imagine how many deaths there would have been, presumably, if people would have been, up for killing each other.
I think firing overhead with a rifle compared to if you're just like in a nest where you can just indiscriminately spray across the field is probably a big reason as to why there were so many casualties.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys have ever used a machine gun, but one of the things you're taught with a machine gun is you don't aim, you point. There's no aiming involved because the machine gun is going to bounce around when you fire it anyway. So there's not a whole heck of a lot of point in aiming specifically. You just point it in a general direction and then just rake it back and forth.
I mean, there's also the point of artillery. Like for artillery, you don't necessarily need to look people in the eyes while you shoot. You just get orders for where the enemy is roughly, and then you just fire on away.
Yeah. Or gas.
Yeah, I mean,
this is starting
in war.
Well, that goes back to that does go back to Fight Club in that one of the core points of Fight Club is it is man on man, and you look the other man in the face.
Yeah.
While you're pummeling him, it's personal. It's visceral.
Also, it's over at some point. There's a rule that as soon as somebody goes limp or taps out, it's over. So it's not, you don't fight to the death. You fight because you fight, and when somebody wants it to stop or when it needs to stop, it stops. And this is different from war.
Yeah, and they're all very chummy with each other afterwards, aren't they? There's no harbouring resentment because you just had your face smashed in.
It reminds me I have two brothers, and it reminds me of when we were unsupervised, we would, not torture the hell out of each other, but we would get really physical in rough play, and this seems to be like the superlative of this. This is just what brothers would do to each other. Just play pretend fights, and then that's also why they form a team afterwards. They bond over this.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've ever done martial arts or anything like that. You tend to get the people who are in the group. They're all very. I know there's a definite bond. Like if you're in a different situation and something happens, then everybody kind of. What team you're on.
Yeah. If there was a bit more structure and if this was structured in a different way, just the Fight Club, not the Project Mayhem, then it could have value to these men. But he then swaps just having it as a Fight Club to something more destructive in Project Mayhem because of the jealousy he has that an attractive man is getting the attention of Tyler Durden instead. So
the Fight Club just becomes a recruitment tool, doesn't it? Essentially.
Right. Let's go on to Marla. I thought there's not really any other quote I could put for this. As deeply unpleasant as it is, this is probably a bit of trivia that a lot of people know, but in the film, this line was used. It was submitted, and the censor boards said, you need to change this line. And so they sent back and forth several editions. And then finally David Fincher said, whatever I send to you next, we're keeping in the film. And then the next submission was, I haven't been F'd like that since grade school. And then the censor board said, can we please switch it back to the abortion line? And he was like, no, we should have stuck with it first time around.
Yeah.
But Albion, you didn't want this stream spicy, and yet these are the slides.
This is the most progressive slide we've had on there. What are you talking about?
Is the Albion actually a real name, or is it just one of your many aliases?
Yes, my other alias begins with the letter after P.
Oh,
There is a certain element. Oh, this is going down the route, shouldn't it? But there is a certain element of trust the plan with Tyler Durden. So unquestioning loyalty to the plan, however ridiculous it may seem.
You were saying just now that he was trying to break down any form of hierarchy, but in the same time he's building a hierarchy. And then at the same time, people don't follow this hierarchy, because as soon as he at one point says, well, we have to stop all of this, because the narrator is trying to stop everything that Tyler is doing, then everybody says, oh yeah, you said you would say this. So basically,
he's not building hierarchy exactly. He's basically deifying himself and flattening out everyone else.
yeah.
So it's like, it's not a hierarchy. It's just I am on the top of the pyramid and everyone else is flat underneath me.
It's not a
communist
command
system.
Yeah.
That's how cults typically work.
Yeah, especially cults
When
of
you have a
personality.
cult
Which is pretty
leader.
much what this is.
Yeah.
That's also what you see in the Space Monkeys. They look like cult members. They repeat the mantras. They because he says, well, I'm enlightened and enlightened and things like that. But in the end, it turns out to be a cult. Like, they just repeat the same lines. They eat the same food. They look the same. They just have their little menial job again, but now they're scrubbing dishes or cooking rice or getting snails from leaves.
Yeah, exactly. And it could be viewed as either him militarizing them, or it's like, it's like Heaven's Gate, that they shaved their heads and wore exactly the same outfit as well, didn't they?
And drank the Kool-Aid.
Were they Kool-Aid? No, I can't remember. Were they Kool-Aid or were they bags over their head?
No, that's not. Jonestown was.
That was Jonestown.
Yeah.
Didn't even get to drink Kool-Aid in that instance.
Amateurs.
Right. Anything we want to mention on Marla? We probably covered her by proxy in quite a few topics, but one of the notes I have for her is there's a quote in the book just saying that we are a generation of men raised by women, and like I said, this is one of the few female characters we have in the book, and there's reference to is having another female really what we need.
She's an absolutely horrible person.
Yeah.
She's also had a lot of guys.
The book, perhaps because he's a homosexual, the book doesn't really explore sex particularly, right? It's not really about sex.
She's particularly
Is it?
pneumatic. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Again, I think it could be that, or it could be that if he pushed further on the sexual parts, it could take up the majority of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking back to Lord of the Flies. If you bring up certain topics and you can't brush over them, it will probably take up half the time you're writing. So obviously it is mentioned, but it's pushed down quite a lot.
Yeah, there's also the idea that he was put off her as well because he at certain points, because he didn't want to feel like another notch on her bedpost. Another, story she could tell, because she's always coming out with these lines. I had a boyfriend that did this, or I had a boyfriend that did that, and she always seemed to have had some boyfriend, that would fit that story.
Yeah, then it struck me maybe Martha as narrator. Right?
Was the 90s the beginning of this
culture.
fascination with crazy women? It
was definitely the start of the ladette culture.
What do you mean?
Well, okay.
I mean does Desdemona ring a bell?
No, I would say more. It's the
more socially acceptable
casual
Carmen
ladette thing.
Yeah, okay.
I mean the crazy woman has been throughout all of human history.
It's been a trope, but I mean, it was the 90s
Tropes
when
reflect reality.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the majority of society. But when was it permissible to get with crazy?
It is this woman who's crazy and negating her femininity by being as kind of crude as possible, right?
Are you familiar with courtesans, geishas? I mean,
yeah,
it's been historically present throughout all of human society.
It's been present, but it's never been as socially permissible as now. But Justine, you go ahead.
I think it has been more socially permissible as well a lot of times, just before a fall of society, perhaps. But
let's let Justine say something.
Women are there are plenty of decadent and cruel women. It's just the way she negates her femininity. That's if you want to talk about ladettes in the 90s, right? Like trying to outdrink men and all this kind of stuff. That is a sort of 90s style of female, I would say. Also the cynicism, eye rolling.
Yeah, it's a very snarky book, and in sometimes it can get, almost frustratingly so, where you just want to punch the author. Sometimes it's so like up itself. For the most part, I don't mind it. It's not done too badly, but particularly with Marla, can be very that kind of 90s smug Gen X. Oh.
Yeah. Well,
there you go. With this
very Gen X. He should have been in AA's, Gen X.
Yeah, I mean, she is that kind of a epitome of what that kind of person was like. But yes, I think the Ladette comment is true. And again, it's this: they're trying to rebel against the system without even thinking about the fact that the system is where you're getting pushed to turn femininity off and get attracted to this kind of Ladette culture, because it's this increasing acceptable in casual promiscuity and this kind of more consumerist for females, but not for feminine products. Am I making sense on that?
Yeah.
So it's not that they're not rejecting the system. They're just feeding the system in another way.
Just buying more stuff, and also working. The idea of working as more important than building a family. Like, well, that fits right in with corporate culture, doesn't it?
Yes, that's the other big point. Is once you double the workforce, you can halve the wages, or you can double the workload.
And there's also the fact that she's got less of it. Well, her life's not going anywhere near as well as the main characters. Yet she doesn't have this. She seems quite happy to just kick along as she is.
I think she has given up already more of her life. Well, the main character is still trying to fight back in some capacity, trying to deal with it.
She's also, not to cast aspersions or anything, but she's a female, so she has the ability to, get resources from men, especially, weak men.
Not for long. Not from the descriptions of her in the book. She's not ever really portrayed as being particularly attractive. I don't get the impression anyway. Obviously, we now look at her as being Helena Bonham Carter, and she's got a kind of sexy mystique that's brought by the actress, I suppose. But in the actual book, there's nothing that really makes her sound particularly appealing.
I don't know what your standards are for.
Well, no, but I think that her unappealingness is part of the appeal. Because it's kind of that rejection of beauty standards crap that people were intentionally making themselves as unattractive as possible in some ways.
Are you saying that Helena Bonham Carter and Brad Pitt were horribly miscast in that movie?
No. Well, I can't really think of anyone because I've seen her in it. I can't think of anyone else that would suit the role as well as her.
The problem with Helena Bonham Carter is that she does have a very, very symmetric face. So she has a pretty face. So even if you frizzle up her hair and put her in an old dress, then she still looks kind of pretty. Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes for Brad Pitt. They put him in like this horrible pink bathrobe, and he still looks like Brad Pitt. You can put anything on him. He still looks like a handsome guy. So that's kind of the thing that they bring to that role, but that might not have been in the book. But I've seen the movie first, so my if you say Tyler Durden, then I have this. Then I see Brad Pitt.
But the thing that's in the book and in the film is the way that the two characters grow into each other. Like in the film, Edward Norton's pretty skinny and stuff, and Brad Pitt's muscly and that. And as the film progresses, Edward Norton bulks up, and and they get closer and closer together. And in the book, it also it describes the way they look and the main character's physique. His face is getting more bashed up as it goes along, and he's slowly, his description gets closer to Tyler's as it goes along.
And then there's the character who's described as looking like an angel, and he just wants to destroy something beautiful. So there's another act of iconoclasm that happens there.
I think a few people feel like that about Jared Leto, though.
Yeah.
Have you seen some of the? This is the bottom of the barrel kind of stuff that we could report on. But the theories of the Joker from Suicide Squad being the same character as Angel Face.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It was literally a waste of breath even mentioning that because it's so stupid. Unless we've got anything else to talk about on Marla, then I could go on to Angel Face.
Okay.
I've just put the rest of them. These three, which in essence are these two, are basically the only main characters. Everyone else is a supplementary character to the main story. So I've just popped the main minor characters down. And yeah, like you say, it is basically iconoclasm, and it's also a little bit homoerotic in the fact that it is this jealousy of Tyler giving his attention to Angel Face, which provokes the narrator to destroy him and start the road to Project Mayhem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was totally blind to the gay element of this book.
Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it. But then maybe
I don't see it. I think it's really in the reader's eye.
Everyone's disavow. I didn't see it.
No.
Yeah, I
do think it's an interesting lens to look at it through.
More.
I mean, come on. We were talking about the homoerotic influences of Frankenstein, and everyone was on board for talking about that.
No, you were talking about that.
Yeah, it was very.
Don't put that on me.
Frankenstein had very flowery descriptions, of the physique.
So does Tyler.
And Angel Face has literally said that if you put a dress on him, he would look as attractive as a woman.
Well, it's just very feminine. That happens sometimes.
Anyway,
I don't know why he keeps being stuck up on this point, really. Anyway, Chloe. Chloe looks like a skeleton dipped in yellow wax. She's dying of some, I think it's a brain parasite, right? I can't keep track of all those groups he goes to.
Cancer
but
of some description, isn't it?
Something, she's dying. And at some point she has died. And she is one of the persons that he connects to and really, well, he says, well, we're all dying, but not like how Chloe's actually dying, because she's also alone and she's also unhappy, of course. But it's like you're just seeing her disappear, and at one moment she's gone. And then you also have this theme with countdowns, which I think starts with that they're counting down like the minutes.
Oh, yeah. 10 seconds till soul evacuating.
Get back on that one with the space monkeys. But I think she's kind of a mirror image to Marla, where Marla isn't actually dying, but she goes through the same thing. Chloe is dying and actually does transition to a, well, this is a horrible choice of words, move on to the next life. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, also Chloe's outlook is in some ways reflected in Tyler's, and his encounters with Chloe are before he meets Tyler, aren't they?
Yeah.
So it may have in some way informed Tyler's view on the world.
She's also very associated with all the spiritualism, like find your power animal and the door with the 7 chakras and things like that. So there's a lot of Buddhist Eastern philosophy and religion going on there.
Yes, actually, that's a good point, and that is also found in Tyler in the fact that he references Buddhist monasteries being the reason he makes everyone stand outside for 3 days before granting them entry.
Yeah.
So maybe Tyler Durden is Chloe's is Chloe, his internalized Chloe.
That's a stretch.
But just on this Chloe train, she's described several times as being a skeleton dipped in yellow wax, and I do think at one stage he also describes Marla as being that. So you can see that there's a run through of the type of girl he's after.
Also, when he's describing some guys, skinny guys who are fighting, so you have these drug addicts.
Yeah,
and nobody wants to fight them except the other skinny guys, and they're described like skeletons dipped in yellow wax. So it's really the people who are basically
closest to death.
Rotting away.
Yeah,
as it is.
It reminded me a bit of David. I think it's David Baddiel's book, "Whatever Love Means." Has anyone read that? It's about the Princess Diana, sort of the death of Princess Diana and what happened, the weird emotional reaction to that. And there's a very similar character that's dying of cancer, and that's quite interesting.
No, I've never read anything, but I didn't even know he was an author.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
from Monkey Dust.
Also contemporary to that was the AIDS epidemic, where people were dying, of AIDS, which had a similar level of decay prior to death.
Are you making any connections between the orientation of the author?
And I left the connections for you to make because I knew you would.
I just meant that. Let's carry on. What about Big Bob?
Bob had bitch tits.
World Bob.
Yeah, he used to be a bodybuilder, but he used too much juice, and then his body upped the estrogen, so he got bitch tits. He's the
carry on.
He's the first guy where the narrator really lets go. So he describes that I think he's been going to these. He goes to these self-help groups because he can't sleep, and he's been going for a year. And it's the first time that when Bob hugs him, that he really starts to cry, and that he actually can sleep. Bob is also a broken man. So he had testicular cancer because of his steroid abuse, and so he has no testicles anymore. And also he's been divorced 3 times, and he lost his gym and things like that. So he's also a broken man, and that's also why Bob joins Project Mayhem.
His whole group does.
His whole group, and in the end, he is he's the first one. He's killed because he's holding a power drill, which police think is a gun. And then because he died, he's no longer a space monkey. He actually has a name, because in death you do have a name. And that's when they start chanting this mantra. His name is Robert Paulson. He's 48 years old. His name is Robert Paulson. So he becomes this martyr for the movement. So
Bob might be the most tragic character of the lot, actually. And I think he's a good addition, because he does give some kind of light, I suppose, to some of the other characters.
Yeah, it's also
not
more
much.
It's more of the idea of what makes a man as well.
Yeah, because in some ways he takes on a maternal figure because of his man tits, by being a comforter.
He's not got man tits, he's got bitch tits.
Oh, sorry, I stand corrected. Yeah, because of his ability to comfort the narrator. And again, it kind of hints at this. Even a buff bodybuilder can't be a paternal figure for the narrator, because he is emasculated and not able to fulfill the role.
It's this incredible abject quality to this character.
Well, in the book, he's like a blonde, pretty boy, isn't he? I know he's not in the film, but in the book, he certainly is.
In the film, he's Meatloaf.
Meatloaf's great, but yeah.
And also this theme of emasculation, where men losing their testicles and becoming less valued. So losing something important is when they threaten all the police officers to not investigate fight clubs. They threaten to castrate them. So this theme where you become less of a man because you lose this part of your body comes also back in other parts.
I think if you were casting the film now, current day Val Kilmer would be a great fit.
This phenomenon of the abuse of steroids that creates, I mean, I've heard terrible things happen to your testicles without cancer getting involved, right?
Yes.
This is sort of a weird inversion of masculinity, isn't it? Where your muscles bulk up, testicles shrink. It's just intense.
Yeah. Again, it goes to this faux masculinity where you're doing anything you can to have a pastiche of being a man by trying to bulk on muscle without realizing that isn't actually the true meaning of what being a man is. It helps, and being physically fit is obviously part of what could be considered the ideal man, but they get obsessed with this one facet of it and ignore the rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the one and end all of being a man.
Yeah.
Bob even has the family, doesn't he? He's got the family, and he's got the business, and he's got the house.
Yeah, but his kids won't talk to him anymore.
That's
It
what
might
I mean.
be one of the few mentions of children. I can't think of any other mention of children aside from Marla's quote, but let's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
it reinforces the overriding theme of the superficiality of the book.
But this is my disagreement. I don't think it's of the book. I think it's of the characters within the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's done intentionally.
What is a book but a story about characters?
Yes. Yeah. No. Because you're taking what I think you're taking out the fact that it's being read by people that can interpret it.
Yes.
It's not an endorsement of the characters.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm just reading what's on the page.
All right. I'm not going to try and make you like it.
Damn it.
You will.
You're going to sit there.
Yeah, we're just not finishing the stream until you say you do. Right, who have we got? We've done Chloe, Big Bob.
I can always close my browser window, thank you.
I can see where his revulsion, where your revulsion.
No,
lies,
like I said,
but
I understand the complaints. I just view it slightly differently. And actually, to be honest, most of what you're saying, I don't even disagree with. It's just I think that it removes the interaction with the purveyor of the art with the art itself. I think there's also a story being told between the actual art piece and the person consuming it, which I think is kind of the missing step in maybe your analysis. But I still understand it.
There's a gap between the writer and the narrator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the boss, I guess, because we've already touched on Angel Face. Unless there's another thing you want to re-emphasize there, Albion.
No, I don't have anything else to say on him.
You sure you don't want to make more connections?
It sure is true.
I can close my browser window as well, you know. Right.
you can never leave.
What do we have to say
Hotel
on the
California.
The boss is basically the most corporate person I've ever met. He has a tie collar for every day. He tries to manage the narrator, asking him what all the photocopies are on his desk, what they're all about. There is this great line in the movie. I don't know if it's a book, whether he has to deprioritize his current priorities, which basically sums up like half of the things I meet in the office. And he also, the narrator also describes him as some kind of father figure, but then he also says that because Tyler kills him in the. There's a difference between the movie and the book. So in the book, the boss is killed by Tyler. And the scene that happens in the movie where he's being fired actually happens with the union projectionist and the waiter jobs that he's having. So for him, his boss was actually the closest thing he had to a father, even though it was only on corporate level, because this was the only figure that basically told him to do anything and told him, like, go get a different pair of pants because the ones you're wearing now are there's blood on them and we can't have that. So he's the only one who did things like that, and that's probably also the reason why Tyler killed him.
But he does say he likes him as well, doesn't he? The narrator likes him, Tyler. Presumably he doesn't. But yeah.
The narrator says, I actually like my boss. That's what he says, but whether he means it or not, because he's very antagonistic to it. So like the spiteful teen, because his boss comes with this paper with the Fight Club rules on it, which he forgot on the photocopier, which happens a lot apparently. And then the boss asks, what's this? And then he starts describing, like, this is from a very vengeful person. And just imagine if he would walk around with this gun and how many people he could shoot. But if he used this gun, it's actually lighter and there's a bigger magazine. And then he says, you shouldn't bother me with everything you find. So he's like this teenager, which starts rebelling against his dad.
The totally accurate gun description.
Yeah, we haven't actually mentioned that. Some of his... Well, the two main things to focus on are the chemistry and his gun knowledge, which I think might be a little bit surface level. I mean, I'm no expert on either, so because he uses some technical terms, sometimes it's easy to dupe the reader. But I mean, even I read the creating a silencer by drilling random holes into it and thought, hang on, what's going on here?
Again, as I said on one of our other streams, the gross chemistry is correct. The actual implementation details are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me a bit of what was it called? You used to have that on BBSs and stuff. It was the anarchist cookbook.
Yeah. I was thinking exactly the same thing, and I think it probably got popularized around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was about 10 years earlier.
Yeah.
So end of the 80s, that was when it was happening.
Was it? Because I know this was 96.
When I was a teenage rocker, I knew a lot of people who would own only a copy of William Burroughs' Junkie and, the Anarchist Cookbook.
Oh, God, they sound like the worst people.
That's partly, yeah. I mean, it is a bit. Spending time in the company of these characters is a little bit like that. It's like, oh gosh, I already know these people.
Yeah, the thing is, most of those people, and they're now the kind of people that would, be on the side of the left now, as in they've totally abandoned.
They'd be the same people saying that Twitter should ban.
Yeah, they've left the
individuals.
What it wasn't anti-authoritarianism that they had in mind. It was just their side
winning.
Yep.
Whereas I've just been anti-authoritarian.
Yeah. Just on the boss, I didn't like the line of him saying that he liked him because I felt like there was no hint at that previously. To me, it just came out of the blue. I understand that it was, like you say, it could be seen as a rebellious teenager then realizing that when they've lost that father figure that they missed him. Like you only know what you miss when it's gone. But because there's no reference to that previously, I felt it was a bit out of the blue.
Well, I thought the boss was the most sympathetic character in the book, but that's not terribly surprising.
Oh yeah, I had a lot of sympathy with him. Having ties for a different color tie for every day of the week, I've got nothing wrong with that. I quite like it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, the boss guy, he's totally embraced the corporate culture, hasn't he? And the whole corporate life and.
Well, that's also why he's the manager. He's the boss. Because if you don't like corporate life, you won't climb the corporate ladder.
Well, not even that so much as he's come up with a way to, systemize his life, and apparently it's working for him. So here's someone who's managed to come up with a way to deal with, the society and the situation in which he finds himself. Which, given that he's that the main character's boss, implies it's a very stressful position, would be, a good mechanism for coping.
I'm thinking about Ricky Gervais in the Office right now.
He does feel like the least one of the least creative persons in the book, because he basically has just made a schema for his life, for his week. On that day I'll get a haircut, on that day I'll wear that tie, and that day I'll wear that tie. And so somebody who fits really well in that corporate procedure world.
Yeah, not everyone needs to be creative.
No, but
some people just want to be NPCs.
That's also why he clashes with the narrator, who's a very creative person who feels trapped in that corporate world. So while somebody like the boss, who is really structured, would feel at home in a corporate world because everything has a lot of structure, while the creative person would feel oppressed by that, and he would start to rebel against that. And that's actually also what you see happening. The little haikus which he starts writing to his colleagues is one expression of that, and another expression of that is the kind of things he does as a waiter and as a projectionist, splicing in the frames and urinating in the rich people's food.
It's like a modern artist, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
Yoko
this
Ono
book
probably took some
accurately-
influence.
Yeah, I can definitely say that this book accurately reflects modern art.
Oh yeah. Very much. So what was it? Duchamp and people like that.
Yeah, I imagine Shia LaBeouf is probably a fan of this book.
That man is art.
And he will never divide us.
All right, we covered Raymond already, didn't we?
Raymond
Not
K.
specifically.
Hessel, yeah, that's the guy who is one of the human sacrifices. He's threatened by the narrator to change his life, which is, if you come to think of it, it's a bit like the stick and the carrot and the stick, where you try to motivate somebody by threatening him, which can be effective, but usually isn't. And
it's not even threatening, is it? It's drawing their attention.
Is it not?
Is it not?
Well,
He's
no,
holding
it's drawing their attention to the fact that if they died here and now, their life would have been meaningless. And
No,
if they carry on their...
No. Listen, he holds a gun to it.
You got to remember, he's from the north of England.
Yeah. He holds it. That's normal there. Yeah, that's a normal school day.
How they grease each other.
Simple as. The narrator holds a gun to his head and he says, like, what do you want to be? And he says, a veterinarian. Okay, if you're not a veterinarian in 3 months, I'll check on you in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year. If you're not on your way of becoming a veterinarian, you're dead. I'll kill you. That's a real threat, at least in the parts I'm from.
Yeah.
But that's basically saying, well, if you don't clean your room, I'll hit you. So that's basically using the stick, threatening somebody to motivate them, while saying, well, if you do that by your own volition, then I'll reward you, which is a different way of parenting. So yeah, it feels like a bad way of trying to parent somebody, the human sacrifices thing.
I don't know.
Well, it also...
I read it differently.
I viewed it as, again, this entire book is all about surface level appearance corrections and, construction. Asking somebody in the middle of probably one of the most stressful crisis situations they've encountered in their life, what it was that they wanted to do when they were a kid, and then forcing them to do that at the point of a gun is a superficial correction.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with actual meaning or actual value or actual desire. It's
a very weak coping mechanism. That's true.
You can also tell it's just him lashing out, because in exactly the opposite scenario, if Tyler came across someone that was studying to be a vet, he would just disregard them as following a 9 to 5, following the plan and falling into the system. So you can tell it's just a way of acting out, because there's no consistency with it.
Yeah, because the only other thing that they do that is similar is when one of the homework assignments is to start a fight with a stranger and lose. The idea being that there's a lot of men in his eyes that don't know what it's like to come up against something and beat it, a struggle and overcome it.
Yeah, most people
Starting a
will.
fight with someone, allowing them to win, or it gives them the experience of having this fight and winning it.
And that's supposed to be the point of the father during childhood, is to allow the child opportunities to succeed.
Yeah, and also letting them win during play. So if you play with a pet or with a kid, you have to let them win at least 30% of the time, if I remember correctly.
But not enough to devalue the win.
No, because if they always win, it has no value. But if they always lose, then they don't want to play with you again, unless they really like the activity itself. So if there's a reward like that, so if they you have to let them win like a certain percentage, then they will keep on playing.
Yeah, so that's another Petersonian.
Yeah, it's something in psychology which I forgot.
What's the eternal game?
Beating 3-year-olds at chess is a little.
Sorry, beating 3-year-olds at chess or at chess. Sorry. So,
something about beating 3-year-olds. Let's just carry it.
Well, was it Matt Keeb who came up with a YouTube video of wrestling a baby?
I'm going to move on to the next slide. So this one is it's mainly just to see if there's any other comments that people want to make about some of the groups he was involved with. We've covered basically all of them, but the kind of meta point about them is that, relating to what we've already said, they basically all fulfill the same role, and none of them have any higher value aside from Fight Club is the closest one that could attain something higher, but he doesn't actually allow it to, because he then develops into Project Mayhem, which is just
all of these organizations are basically a coping mechanism for the narrator. So all of these things and all the people involved just are sucked up into it, but they all start because he can't sleep and he can't deal with his life.
They're all looking at some kind of higher attainment, and all of them don't fulfill it. Yeah. And not necessarily because of the organization itself, but because of him. Some of them are more conducive to it than others, and then ultimately it's him.
Then I would agree with Brandy that if just one of these groups would go out and help the elderly, like in Marla's hotel, just to take care of them and improve their life, then suddenly they would create value, and then this book would have a positive message. But that doesn't happen.
Do you not think the cancer recovery groups could be that?
Yeah, but they quit. They're disbanded.
Yes.
He basically dismantles them through his actions.
Yeah, no, I agree. But if he had focused his attention onto a group like that, do you think that they could have fulfilled the same role and fulfilled something a bit higher?
Well, apparently he's good at organizing and motivating people. So yeah, he could build something useful out of that, because it's a group of men who need help. And if he would just focus an effort on helping them, he could create something meaningful for them and for himself, which in the end would probably help him. But yeah, that would require hard work. And I guess people like to avoid hard work and go down the easy route.
And in his eyes, the recovery groups are there to help him, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything exists to help him.
And obviously in the book, they literally save his life.
Yeah, in the end, then they that's the difference between the book and the movie. So in the end of the book, the Marla comes with the people from the self-help group, and they basically want to save him now, because apparently he does really have a problem and he does need help.
You think?
Apparently.
Well, I mean, apparently to them at that moment, because before that he was just somebody who was suffering from the same thing. But in the book, he's meeting up with Marla because they're trying to fight Tyler by keeping him awake, and Marla is very angry at him, and he doesn't know why initially. And then they're at the self-help group, and apparently he shot somebody who was working against Project Mayhem, and so they have this fight, and then the people from the self-help group, instead of being antagonistic, they want to help him because he is somebody who is suffering. They recognize that, so they come to help him, and then in the end he shoots himself, and then he's in some mental hospital, if I correctly interpreted it.
Mhm.
Or he's in heaven.
Or he's in heaven, and he's. But then,
Yeah, but heaven is run by angels who are all part of Project Mayhem.
Yeah, or none of it's real. Who knows?
Who knows? But that's the difference between the book and the movie. And I do agree that I think that the movie has a more a better ending, as in, yeah, he gets together with Marla, and you don't know what happens after that. But apparently, he has defeated Tyler, which is the antagonist of the whole story.
Apart from the
I mean,
fact
the
that
end
he's
of
now
the-
got 2 sequels that
You mean
which
about
Tyler returns.
Sebastian?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the author prefers the ending of the film because that's quite rare.
Yes, indeed.
Well, the ending of the book, you can also very much tell the Foucault kind of influence, where everything just ends up being like deconstructed psychological mess, and you don't really know where truth lies.
Well, I mean, it's perfectly reflexive of Brazil and other similar movies around that time period.
Yes, that's a good point.
Brazil is from the early 80s, if I.
Yeah, those are a bit
Is it mid-80s?
I think it's 80.
mid-80s, yeah.
Yeah, mid 80s. But yeah, but you're right in the fact that the ending is, you have the antagonist and he ends up in some kind of madhouse. 1984 is the same, where he ends up drinking Victory Gin, and he sees his old lover, and they barely recognize each other. So it's a very depressing ending.
Yeah, and
And it had such potential.
I think Brandick is gonna write a better book soon.
What's the name of your Fight Club that's going to be this just family orientated? Peterson Club.
Family Club.
Family.
I call it church.
Well, yeah, I mean, it basically is trying to fulfill that function, but deify an absolute monster. Right.
Does it have rules? Anyway, let's move on. That's
where?
Oh, when I think of it, actually, do you have that rules there on the slides?
No, I was going to, but I thought there's no point.
Why? They're almost like the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, they are. They actually change at one stage, don't they? As well, he drops a rule and like rejigs it. But yeah, there's basically, I didn't really think there was much we could speak about with the rules.
Well, yeah, it's one of the themes in the book, as it is that these clubs have rules, and they're very memeable. So the first rule of X is not to talk about X is something that has creeped into our culture.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the rules do change. So anyway,
and then you also have the rules changing from being the rules of Fight Club to the rules of Project Mayhem.
Yeah.
Anyway, most of the themes we've already covered, but anything else deeper that people want to go into on any of them?
There's also the idea, like when he first meets Tyler. Well, not when he first meets Tyler. When he meets Tyler after his house gets blown up, there's the idea that you need to get rid of all your possessions, and the fact he's only got like 2 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, because the rest of his stuff got blown up.
And because he's invested his identity in that stuff, it's like erasing that self.
Yeah.
Yeah, the concept of you need to own your belongings or your belongings will own you.
Nope.
I think I quite like that, and it's something that has been in my mind for quite a while. That kind of theme. I think it's a valuable lesson from the book.
It's the classic Buddhist detachment, which it has merits, but at the end of the day, the Gnosticism of Eastern religions is really something to be taken very, very carefully. because it can lead to, to nihilism.
I mean, there's different reasons for wanting things, isn't there? I mean, there's like the whole keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, and I don't. I know those kind of people, but
Yeah, I think that the point of Eastern Gnosticism, leading to nihilism is true, and I think that it's inevitable with some of the roots, but it can manifest itself in far healthier ways than anything expressed by some of the Western thinkers in that same field.
Yeah, I mean, we don't need Eastern religions to tell us to have a poverty of spirit, to cling to possessions like the rich man.
Yeah, it's not unique to there, but it's just it's something that's quite often associated with Western philosophy, with Eastern philosophy more than Western.
Well, it's much more core to the belief system.
Mm-hmm.
There's no God to which one needs to dedicate oneself. There's no 10 Commandments to anchor it in secular Christianity. It's all about relationship to the practical and the real. If you start looking at that,
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert enough, and I don't want to generalize because obviously, when talking about Eastern philosophy, there's there can be many schools of thought to go into. But I agree that it's probably more prominent in some areas. Right. The part that I wanted to bring up, if we just pop down the list, like I say, most of them we've covered, but see if anyone else has any other points. The one that I have down here just on death, there's a Bowden quote when he was discussing death, and he said that if you live in a society where death has no meaning, life has no meaning. And I feel like this
such a brave new world.
Yeah, it ties in nicely with that, doesn't it?
Yeah, this makes sense in this book, and as a looking at it through an existential lens, they're then trying to manufacture some kind of meaning to death, and then counteracting that with a meaning to life, as opposed to there being some intrinsic meaning to both of them.
They literally say that in death you have a name, so that means that only in death you have meaning. Because as long as you live, you're basically recycled stuff.
Yeah, and there is very much this making people consumerist product. So materializing people and removing their transcendental nature is part of the book as well. This constant reference to people just being, meat and being decaying matter. And obviously their whole business venture is based on making soap out of human body fat.
That's the best salt level. Best salt content.
And it does remind that in particular really makes me think back to Brave New World, with the harvesting of is it sulfur, phosphorus? Sorry, from burning corpses.
Yeah, and the normalizing of the death as well. Like with the kids in the they're not hospitals, are they? But where the people go to die.
Well, that's one thing that this doesn't really do. It doesn't normalize death.
Yeah. You carry on.
You can say a lot of things about it, but normalization of death is one thing it doesn't do.
No, it's people who are racing towards it, but they because they're not suicidal, but they are just not on an upward trajectory in life. They are like Marla is racing towards death because she's dying, thinks she's dying from cancer, but it doesn't happen. You have the narrator who is basically just being pummeled to mush. Also, when he's doing the last time in Fight Club, his tongue falls out of his mouth, and there's a hole in his cheek and things like that. And so, but they're not killing themselves. At least even in the end when they're in the tower that's being blown up, it's not blown up because somebody mixed up the. So you could say that Tyler didn't make a bomb and he just acted like there was one, but either he couldn't or he didn't make one.
It's a rejection of life, but not an embrasure of death,
Yes.
which is the only thing that keeps it from being purely nihilistic.
Yeah.
Again, it's surface level nihilism.
It's like
there's nothing deep about any of this.
It's the fast food version of nihilism. It looks like nihilism. It might smell like it, but it's just the packaging and it's just the advertising and just the story, but it doesn't.
So it's a consumerist version of nihilism.
Yeah, it fits well then.
So there we are.
There you go.
Even the criticism is meta.
Corporatist nihilism.
It's something you would enjoy, and then at the end of the day, you would go home back to your parents and back to your comfortable life. So,
yeah, well, this is most of the 90s, isn't it? You go and be your rebellious self, and then when it comes to 5 o'clock, you go back home, you turn on the TV, you put your feet up, and you drink a Coke.
This day and age.
But no, the film seems to be talking to people now, like we were talking about before. I think I've seen a lot of people mentioning it in the past few weeks due to certain.
Yeah, that's because we're going to stream it, Quack. No, but I think you're right.
I don't mean us, I mean other people.
There is this message of being of having no goal in life and no purpose and feeling lost, and I think that's something that's happening nowadays quite a lot. So people are looking for a somebody to rescue them, some messiah-like figure.
Yes, well, unfortunately, some people have attributed that status to
whomever. Who's typical, yeah.
Yeah, but it's not that you can find anyone that you should attribute it to, because you should embody it yourself.
No, it's not someone that can rescue you. It's some cause that you can rescue, I guess.
Yeah, but that's also
not what you could do for or what your country can do for you, but what you could do for your country.
You're a cunt.
Bang.
Really. No, but it's the same thing that if he would help the people in those groups instead of using them for his own purpose, then he would have created something, and then probably he would have rescued himself in the end, because he would have built a lot of friendships and created meaning by taking that responsibility, but he didn't. So and that's also what you see nowadays. You see a lot of people blaming other people for their problems.
Yeah, well, his path to salvation would have been through leadership, but he chose to lead them in a completely different direction to what would have been a way of
being productive and useful to society or himself, even.
Well, yes, but even beyond that, upwards, putting them on an upward projection, an upward trajectory for life. I don't know. There's something more. It's not just they're destructive materially. It's that they're spiritually completely destructive, and beyond destructive, they remove anything metaphysical about themselves. That is what nihilism is.
Mm-hmm. But he only is able to do it at surface level.
Plastic nihilism.
I like that term. Did you just coin it?
I just made it up.
That's copyrighted for Magnum Opi. I like that.
I'll send you the bill.
But it also reminds me of the bit in Austin Powers when it turns out his son, Dr. Evil's son, has made like a really good job of running the business, and it's legally making loads of money. Yet he wants to take it back. It's a bit like Tyler's made this great company that's making loads of money, yet somehow he still wants to carry on with this nonsense.
Well, because in some ways his success in business is his way of being rebellious towards business and trying to, put the middle finger up to the man. But even that is surface level. Everything. Actually, I'm being swayed towards your point that everything is surface level, but I still think it's intentional.
Well, I mean, it's also the ultimate middle finger to the main character too, because this Project Mayhem and the Fight Clubs and everything proves conclusively and objectively that he could be a success, but he chooses not to be.
He can be everything he wanted to be and he needs to be, but he doesn't do it. Because
I mean, even before that, he's achieved everything that he set out to achieve. You know, he's got the decent job, he's got the decent house, he's got all the fancy clothes and furniture that he wants.
He fulfilled all the preconditions his father said to him.
He just considers himself unfulfilled, and then he goes and looks for fulfillment and doesn't find it. And then, in a fit of pique, he decides to destroy it for everyone else.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a lot of things in life. It's people that can't handle a certain thing think that nobody else should be able to have whatever it is because they can't handle that. You know, so it's like someone saying we should ban fast food because they can't control themselves and only eat one burger a week and they're eating 4 a day and get obese. You know, it's. You know, he can't handle corporate living, therefore nobody else should be able to have anything.
It also kind of reminds me of the speech the architect, I mentioned him I think every stream, but the architects in the Matrix, when he says that at first they made it's H. Smith who does it. At first they made a perfect Matrix where everybody was happy, and it failed, and it feels a bit like that. Okay, he has this job, and this job allows him to live comfortably or at least make money. And he has all the freedom to do like go to self-help meetings every evening or do something constructive with his life, but still he seems to destroy everything around him. So and to me it feels like, okay, he's living in good times. There is no pandemic, there is no war, and they even complain about that there is no war, and as a result you have these weak men who do not have anything going for them in their life, and they start to break it all down. They are starting to create hard times. So
it's not even that the weak, the guys in it aren't necessarily weak. They've got nothing to apply themselves to.
Yeah, but they're spiritually really weak. They have nothing they can say. Well, I might not have any testicles, but I still live for my kids who'd call me every week or something like that. They don't have that. So they are weak in some way. They don't have any fortitude to
which was the point in them starting the fights with strangers and letting them win. It was to show them that they were capable.
Yeah, but it was also some kind of a homework assignment as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean though. The reason that they did it was for that reason, as laid out in the book anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just popped into my head then is thinking about absurdism and existentialism in other media, and one of the other influences he had that I didn't put on there was Jean-Paul Sartre, and I've always liked the story of Sisyphus because when I was a little bit more into perhaps absurdism than I am now, I still like the idea that even if moving the rock up the hill is completely meaningless, what else are you going to do? And I feel like that is kind of an element in this story as well, where he doesn't know anything else other than the corporate model, and that's why he makes the soap. You know, he doesn't want to move the boulder at all, but ultimately he looks around and sees nothing else but the hill and a boulder, and thinks, well, okay, I guess I better carry on pushing then.
And it turns out he's very good at pushing the boulder.
Yes, when he's doing it on his terms, but it's not even that he wants to carry on doing it, but he can't see anything else to do. So,
I think he's actually good at the job that he's doing in the corporate environment, because I don't hear his boss complaining that he's not doing his job well, and his boss actually gives him quite a lot of leeway, quite a lot of time to recover. Like, okay, he might have had a misstep or something happened in his personal life. Give him a couple of weeks and he'll snap back. And that doesn't happen ultimately. But so I think that he is very.
Or it could have been fear. Or it could have been fear, because the descriptions in the book, the film, shows him taking injuries, but in the book, I mean, this man would have looked monstrous. He's got a hole in his cheek, like half of his face is pulverized. Can you imagine working with him? It's one of the. I'm not asking this to be realistic, but there is no way in hell you could go and be a waiter with a face like mush, as described in the book. No one would want that, especially if you've got a hole in your cheek.
That's also why he's fired, isn't he?
Yes, but there's no way you'd be allowed in any shift looking like that.
What's the problem with the hole? You just put your finger against it when you drink coffee. No, but you do have a point. It sounds a bit ludicrous. Like he has this job as
Almost
a waiter.
absurd.
Yeah, like some Monty
Like-
Python sketch.
I've known people with face piercings that found it difficult enough to drink, so let alone having a massive hole in the side of your face.
Right. Is there anything else we want to cover on the themes?
No, I think we had most of
No, I
them.
think we've
Isolation. Yeah.
We've covered the masculinity and the absurdism.
Okay. So the only other side I wanted to touch on was critical response. For the most part, it was well received, especially given the time. It was it was made at the right time, right place, and was promoted a lot. Obviously, the critics that came about mainly are the people that have said that it promotes violent behavior, which it's hard to know where I stand on it, because I don't think the book does. But if you're reading it without any critical thinking, then you could definitely see it as being a promotion of violence. But as I say, I think it promotes the ability of combat to be a cathartic experience, but not the way in which it's actually done in the book. But a lot of prisons apparently ban it because it gives them too many ideas.
I think at the time there was more space for like maybe a critique of feminism emergent. You know, they hadn't kind of closed off all those channels.
Yeah, well, the other big criticism of it is it's anti-feminist, but I don't really see that as being
Isn't
a
everything?
critique.
if you look at the time, you might remember the I think it was the guy who wanted to ban Grand Theft Auto because it was too violent.
Something Thompson, Jack Thompson.
Yeah, I think so. And he wanted to ban Grand Theft Auto because it would lead to violence, while research shows that every time one of those games is released, you have a decrease in violence, probably because everybody who is violent is playing that game. So there should be a continuous stream of Grand Theft Auto games. But that kind of critique fits in with that, because in the 90s, everything which was like rough was odd. Everything was really sanded down, and everything was really smooth as it is. Things like violence on the street was uncommon. That's something we started seeing at the end of 2010s again.
Right. There was a dip in crime in the 90s, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Significant dip in crime.
That's whether or not games influence violent behavior is a whole other discussion that we could spend a long time on. So let's not go down that route. But
It was a big deal in the 90s, wasn't it?
yeah, I feel like it's been completely dismissed nowadays, but I think that it has more merit than some people might like to admit. I think it might influence people more than they might initially think. Not necessarily that they should go out and commit crime, but I mean, any art that we consume influences the way we view the world. And I feel like there's some people that, because they wanted to deny the connection so badly, just completely denied any kind of correlation between what we ingest as media and our response to other stimuli.
It seems naive to wholly deny this thing. You know, we want to deny it, especially like when I used to be very much sort of an aesthete in that, like I kind of would just defend the excellent artwork above everything. I didn't want to hear any of these critiques, but I've become more open to the moral argument.
The thing is, if you take this away, it doesn't remove violence or play. Because it's something intrinsic to boys and men. But it might amplify. It might, somebody who is already on his way down might see this and start seeing it as a manual. So you have that risk. So
well, my argument is if it doesn't influence people, why is everyone so up in arms? Sorry, why was everyone so up in arms about QCs?
Right.
It's because the thing that they're up in arms about is the actual display of what is actually young people.
How many kids were harmed in writing this book?
How many kids were harmed? Well, it depends on your definition of harm, doesn't it? I suppose.
I mean,
Well,
it's one thing to critique and suggest. It's another thing to outright ban things.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the solution to any of it is banning it. Oh, I'm just saying that I think people need to be more open to the idea that media affects us. I mean, why would people advertise if media doesn't affect us?
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. I'm just saying, like, that I think a lot of people are very, they want to guard that very quickly because they think that it means that therefore they're going to lose something that maybe they love, right? Like,
yeah. But like I say, this could be a conversation we could have for quite a long time. So, yes,
that's why I've refrained from participating.
Let's tie a knot on that there. Any last points?
It's a book filled with degeneracy, written by a degenerate for degenerates.
I liked it.
Really broke it one word.
I don't know if she's a degenerate, is it?
Yeah, it's a book that makes me feel like I need to go take a shower, and I highly recommend it.
I recommend showers as well. They're much cleaner than baths.
Brandig, do you like the film? Do you think it has much more merit than the book?
I did. I haven't watched it lately. At the time, again, I was in high school at the time. Or was it? I don't know. I was in high school or early in college. I don't remember exactly which. But it was. I saw it as an uplifting story about destroying the bonds of unnecessary restrictions and empowering enlightening people to grow beyond their menial existence. Which is entirely different than
if that's your
actually
takeaway,
is meaning. Yeah.
I agree with Brandig that it felt like a liberating movie because it liberated me from thinking in a consumerist way. And if I read the book, I feel it's much more like being without a father. So the search for a father. Could also be that when I saw the movie, I was in my late 20s, and now I'm at the age of where I could have had children myself. If I had not given my life to the church.
I think the book is probably a lot more vitriolic as well, but I still
gave me
think
much more of an Antifa feel. Did the book?
Mm-hmm.
It certainly has parts of it where it where you could project this on these radical groups and how they work and how they recruit and how they manipulate people. So Project Mayhem is just an Antifa with a different goal, but they still both do mischief and break stuff. But yeah, they're both roving packs of monkeys,
and both of them allowed to get off the hook because the police are complicit. Right, let's carry on.
And now we know why.
Okay. The next book we're going to be taking a look at is going to be Catch-22. We're going to be doing that on the 21st of February. I'll run some kind of stream on Valentine's Day for anyone that wants to join in on that, for people that don't have anything better to do. But until that time, I guess we'll call it a day.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Night.
Oh, wait, before we do, one final question. Why was his spirit animal a penguin?
That's your core question from the book?
This is my takeaway.
I have to go.
I also have one remark.
Maybe we'll answer that on the next episode. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.